Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fanfiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
A light, 1-mile warm-up run was finished in 4 minutes flat. Naruto took a deep breath, not that he needed it, of fresh, sea air. The boy allowed his eyes to close contentedly for a few moments. The slightly more haggard breathing of his training partner for the day filled his ears and brought a smile to his face. It was good to know that he was still the best. Ino was rapidly catching him, however. He would have to do something about that. A solid morning of training was just what the doctor ordered. Doubly so after the mission he and his teammates had run 2 days previous. Asuma had been pleased with the result, though he meticulously picked apart their execution of the plan. Naruto was the first to concede that mistakes had been made, but given what they had to work with, he thought that he, Kiba, and Ino had managed rather well. It had been their first true assassination mission, after all. He might have been biased, but he thought they did a pretty bang-up job for an inexperienced team of genin. There had been a few hiccups, but the outcome had been exactly as planned. The more dangerous of the two, Futaba, had been dealt with, while the weaker of the two had been brought in for questioning by Asuma. Naruto hadn't seen the man in a day, but given Asuma's cheerful mood, he had been a wealth of information. By Asuma's estimate, Zabuza should be recovered enough to make his move within the next 2 days. Once they were finished with him, they would move on Gato. Naruto was still unsure about the whole ordeal. He didn't particularly want to get himself involved in what might turn into a civil war if handled the wrong way by the people of Wave. It seemed like something more suited for more experienced ninja. Just killing Gato, while possibly stopping the problems that Wave had, could throw the country into chaos. Gato might have ruled with an iron fist, but he still ruled. Wave had laws, and they were followed for fear of retaliation. It wasn't a good or pleasant system, but it kept people in line. If that was removed, there was no telling what might happen. Wave hadn't been governed by its people in years, and Naruto hesitated in saying that they would just go back to business as usual once Gato was dead. A poor handling of Gato and the immediate aftermath could lead Wave into a period of chaos. He shook his head as he moved through some light stretches. That wasn't his, or his team's, problem. He banished all thought about the mission from his mind as he finished stretching his chest muscles. Guy had impressed on him the importance of proper stretching and rest at a young age. Naruto followed what he man said to the letter. He had also managed to impress that same notion on his partner for the day. He had no want to be injured, especially on a mission like this one, and having an injured teammate would just be too troublesome to deal with, to quote Narashikamaru. Ino was developing nicely, he noted from his peripheral vision as he watched the girl cross and uncross her arms in a simple exercise. Stretching had its benefits, and he was in puberty. That was all the excuse he felt he needed, and it wasn't like any straight male in his graduating class would dispute Ino's attractiveness. He dropped to the forest floor and began a sequence of push-ups. At 50 he would stop and rest for 30 seconds, before doing 50 more. He would do that in increments of 5, and then move to his abs. General strength was important for a ninja, and there was no better way to go about getting it than through push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups. They were perfect for Naruto, who was still young and developing. They allowed for his body weight to work against him while not straining it past its limit. He had moved toward more general strength when he discarded his weight set. They focused too much on the legs and arms, and would eventually lock him into a rigid taijutsu style based on bulk. He had been moving along that path almost subconsciously, by training with Guy and Lee on a regular basis, and he needed to get off that track. It wasn't that it was bad, but it had its disadvantages. His fight with the missing nin had shown him that a rigid taijutsu form could easily be overcome in the right circumstances. The enclosed space of the apartment hadn't allowed for Naruto to use the more sweeping attacks of the Goken style, and it had hampered his efforts tremendously. A more flexible form based around quickness, efficiency of movement, and flexibility was more his speed. It fit in with what he liked in a shinobi fight, and would allow him to use his ever-increasing ninjutsu abilities. He had to start with eliminating many of the kicks, they were common in the Goken style, and replace them with more grabs, grapples, and throws, more close-range tactics. It was easier said than done. Building a taijutsu style couldn't be done overnight, and Naruto knew that it would take years for it to sort itself out properly. There was no sense in not getting started though. The wind ruffled his hair as time flowed past him in the clearing. At one point, he and Ino shared a look, no words were conveyed, and the individualized training session devolved into a spar of epic proportions. Naruto was more than happy to say he won. If you had asked him a few months ago, he would have been scandalized to even hear the suggestion that he would have to go full out to beat Ino in a spar. It was a credit to both him and her that he had no such compulsions anymore. He took a sip from his canteen, reveling in the crisp, cool taste. There was something inherently enjoyable about relaxing alongside nature. It had a certain energy to it. A relaxing energy, if Naruto were to attempt to describe it. Even powerful. It was peaceful though. Naruto shook his head quickly to clear his head of such confusing thoughts. Now wasn't the time to think of such things. No, now was the time to focus on much more important things. Like why Ino's head was currently resting on his shoulder. "Ino?" he asked, his voice light. Yes, Naruto-kun," she responded blearily, sounding like she was the most comfortable person in the world. Naruto blinked at both the tone and the suffix at the end of his name. She had started adding the kun to the end of his name recently, and he didn't know what to make of it. He shook it off. "Is something wrong?" She lifted her head from his shoulder gently. Cerulean Metsi foam as their eyes locked. Naruto fought down a blush at the proximity of their faces. So undignified, he thought. How does she do this stuff to me? No. Her response was simple and she returned her head to its former resting place. Naruto nearly sputtered at the girl, but controlled himself. He settled back into the tree trunk and did his best to make himself comfortable. He knew well enough that Ino wouldn't leave her place of comfort unless he forced her off. Inwardly, he reflected that he wasn't too inclined to move her. Growing up the way he did, with just about no one to either raise him or comfort him, he was mostly unfamiliar with human contact of the pleasant variety. He was sure that this would fall into that branch. It was nice to know that someone was comfortable enough with him to be willing to actually touch him. The fact that it was Ino of all people who was so comfortable with him brought an involuntary smile to his face. He knew he still nursed a crush on the girl next to him, and it hadn't really shrunk since he had gotten to know her. It was just more indication that his life was changing more than he had ever imagined. And for the better. He had a team that he actually liked. No, it was more than that. While he had his squabbles with Kiba and Ino respectively, he wouldn't replace them with anyone. Not for anything. That didn't even go over the effect Asuma was having on his life. The man was rapidly filling the gap that a father figure should have occupied. It had gotten to the point that he wanted the man to be pleased with him just for the sake of it, rather than it being a matter of pride. Kiba was as good a running buddy as he had had back in the academy, and he genuinely enjoyed exchanging barbs with the dog ninja. He had even caught himself defending him to Sasuke a few times. Ino was the same, yet so different. He wasn't quite sure when the girl had started paying attention to him, but he was sure that he didn't mind. Their friendship, if it could be called that, was probably the best thing to come out of his time with Team 10. The girl had proved herself to be more than just another pretty face from the academy. She was far more than that. She was a competent kunoichi, smart, skilled, and determined to prove herself to anyone she came across. Naruto knew himself well enough to know that he never would have given her the same respect she held with him had he never been on her team. He had never done it in the academy, despite her grades showing her competency. He had simply brushed it off, disregarding her as just another Sasuke fangirl. Naruto sighed audibly, unknowingly breaking the companionable silence that had permeated the clearing for the last 5 minutes. Thinking was becoming a steady habit of his these days. It was probably for the best. I suppose I owe you an apology, he said suddenly, startling Ino out of her daze. She had been dozing comfortably for the past few minutes, though he had no way of knowing that, as wrapped up in his own thoughts as he had been. For what? She asked, perplexed. Ino straightened herself, taking her head off Naruto's shoulder with some reluctance. It was remarkably comfortable. Naruto took a moment to formulate his thoughts, and came up with nothing. He couldn't think of how to formulate an apology without sounding like a total douchebag in the process. How exactly did you tell someone that you used to have absolutely no respect for them? Well, I'm not really sure how to say it, he stated rather lamely. Unconsciously, he reached up with his right hand and began scratching the back of his head sheepishly. Ino locked eyes with him, a perfectly manicured eyebrow raised delicately. So, you want to apologize, but you don't know what for? Or you just don't know how to say it, she finished conclusively. The second one, Naruto clarified with some hesitation. This wasn't going at all like he'd wanted. He took a couple of long swigs from his canteen to try to buy some time. You don't know how to say it, Ino said again, looking thoughtful. That means it's probably embarrassing in some way. She directed an accusing glare at him. You've been having perverted thoughts about me, haven't you? The water going down Naruto's throat halted as the boy sputtered incoherently for a moment. What? He coughed, spitting out the remainder of the water he had been drinking. He knew the girl well enough to know she had timed her statement perfectly. Bitch. Of course not, was what he said out loud. Ino narrowed her eyes at him. So you don't think I'm attractive? Any boy that thinks I'm attractive should have some perverted thoughts about me, she concluded in a grand leap of logic. Naruto's eyes widened in horror. One precious life lesson he had learned in his youth was to never insult a woman's looks. That went double for a girl as vain as Ino could be at times. What? No. I mean yes. I do think dash. You know Naruto, Ino cut him off haughtily, offense clear as she moved away from him. Kiba may be an idiot, but he's right that women do like to be appreciated. But that has nothing to do. The blonde boy trailed off as he stared at his teammate. His eyes narrowed as his mind finally caught up with his mouth. Oh no, no. You're not pulling that shit, he declared. Blonde eyebrows shot into the girl's hairline. Excuse me? You're the one insulting me. Not happening, Ino. What's not happening? She asked. She looked annoyed, but Naruto knew better. This, he said simply, gesturing at the little clearing they were situated in. If by this, you mean insulting me, then yes, it is happening. He shook his head. No. You're getting me off topic by teasing me, just like you always do. And by topic, you mean? My apology. Oh, so you're apologizing for insulting me. Well, let's hear it then. The blonde genin sat back on her haunches, an expectant look on her face. I'm not apologizing for that. I didn't even insult you. So what are you apologizing for? She questioned, finally looking bored with the whole situation. She casually buffed her nails against her purple top. For thinking you were a bimbo back in the academy. Naruto burst out as he began pacing about the clearing. He missed the triumphant smirk upon his teammate's face as he got on a roll. I mean, here I am, swallowing my pride and apologizing, and you just start in on your usual routine. I have a routine now. You're teasing. All your flirting and all that confusing shit you do to confuse me. Ah, you don't like it, Naruto-kun, she asked demurely, batting her eyelashes. That. Right there. What you just did, he exclaimed, pointing accusingly at her from across the clearing where he had abruptly stopped pacing. What about it? She asked innocently. It's. He trailed off. It wasn't exactly like he wanted her to stop her teasing. It was enjoyable sometimes. Not to mention that Ino wouldn't be Ino without that facet of her personality. It wasn't like she would actually stop if he asked, in any event. You know what, he said, plopping down next to her on the ground. Never mind. His frustration was spent, so he just settled for leaning back against the same tree he had been resting against before. To his surprise, and inwardly, to his satisfaction, Ino moved back to the same spot she had been in before, casually resting her head on his shoulder once more as if nothing had even been said. He even went so far as to lean his own head on top of hers. Her hair was pleasantly soft. He couldn't really describe their relationship, Naruto decided. They argued about random things often enough, almost as much as she and Kiba did, but they also got along far better than Ino and Kiba did on a regular basis. There was a comfort level there that Naruto couldn't really describe. If push came to shove, he knew full well that Ino would have his back, but that was what teammates did. They were closer than that, somehow. He honestly felt that he would be able to trust her with just about anything, and he had no idea why. That was just fine though. Naruto's eyes drifted shut as he allowed his body to relax for the first time since he had arrived in Wave Country. So, what's this about you thinking I was a bimbo? Arg. A soft smile crept up on an equally soft face as he observed the two preteens from a safe distance. It would be hard to tell that the two were ninja had he not already known. They seemed just like average preteens. He knew full well that they were far from it. He had observed the two for some time now, taking in their routine. They were competent for their age, and that was worrying to an extent. His master would need all the help he could get against the Konoha Jonin when they made their move, and having 2, 3, he corrected himself, capable adversaries besides the Jonin would bode ill for him. It looked like he would have to make an appearance. His heart was saddened by the prospect of killing such happy children, especially ones that were in the midst of young love. It would be necessary though. He would harden his heart so his master's ambitions would be fulfilled. Even as the thoughts crossed his mind, a hand crept toward his concealed senbon pouch within his kimono. His hand brushed cold metal for a moment as he contemplated ending the lives of the two genin right here and now. It could save them some problems down the road, and who knew, it might even send the other two home without having to kill them. The girl settled down next to the boy for the second time, idly resting her head on his shoulder. The boy followed suit shortly after, putting his head on hers. His resolve faltered, and the silent observer replaced his senbon with a click. He couldn't bear to kill such children in such a way. He would harden his heart for his master and his ambitions, but not this day. With another soft smile that made him look even more effeminate, Haku went back to his herb picking, wandering away from the two genin in the clearing, oblivious to his presence. Wind ruffled blonde hair and whipped through black shorts as Naruto stared. It was one hell of a view. Wave was truly a beautiful country from the right angle. Rolling hills from the border of the island inward, lush, green forests that spoke volumes about the amount of moisture in the air. That didn't even begin to describe the view of the sea. Blue, rolling waves that majestically crashed against the shoreline with untold force. Naruto had lived a fairly sheltered life in Konoha. To him, the sea's majesty was awe-inspiring. To an extent, he understood how so many bards had found inspiration in the ocean. He just wasn't quite sure he would be able to find words to properly describe it had he been put on the spot. It was that amazing. From the top of the tallest tree in the immediate vicinity of Tazuna's home, Wave looked to be a country floating in a cloud, the rolling fogs white contrasting with the eternal blue of the sea. From 60 feet in the air, Naruto could see the sun clearly for the first time since he had arrived in Wave Country, its reflection off of the mist and water nearly blinding at times. He wished he had some sunglasses so he could stare at it. He supposed it was for the best, he wasn't so high up to enjoy the view. One heartbeat later had blue eyes focused back on their target, Tazuna's house. The humble abode was about as interesting to regard as it was to watch paint dry, but he had his assignment. He was about used to the boredom by now anyway. He had made this tree his vantage point 3 days ago, when Asuma had estimated that Zabuza would be about ready to make his attack, if he was truly still alive. The plan was simple in nature, and accounted for most of the variables that Team 10 had managed to brainstorm in one of their powwows. The main concern was that Zabuza, or Gato as it may turn out to be, would send men to Tazuna's house in order to eliminate or take the man's family hostage when he was working at the bridge. It was a likely prospect, and would require Team 10 to keep at least one member back to deal with any threat to Tsunami and Inari that may present itself. There had been some serious discussion about who to leave, but Naruto had been conscripted into the job, the reasoning behind it being that he was the most all-around of the three genin, and leaving Asuma behind was out of the question. Naruto just took it as confirmation of his skills. He was being trusted to deal with the possible threat of shinobi knocking on Tezuna's front door, and that was something most Jonin sensei would hesitate at sending one of their relatively green genin to deal with, no matter how low the threat was. It was a nice feeling knowing that someone in a position of authority respected your skills. In any event, he had holed himself up in Tezuna's house for the better part of the first day, citing that it would allow him to immediately respond to anything, but that had lasted as long as he could tolerate Inari's incessant staring at him and negative energy. Honestly, the boy just bled bad vibes. Had it gone on for any longer, Naruto would have been more likely to kill him than any possible attacker. The boy's bitching was downright intolerable. Not to mention that he always stared at him with a look that plainly said he pitied Naruto for his stupidity. In some ways, he had come to really respect Tezuna and the cause he fought for, no matter how it put him and his team in danger, but he couldn't comprehend how he had managed to end up with such a little bitch for a grandson. It was mind-boggling. He supposed he could just pin it on bad parenting, though Tsunami seemed to have a decent head on her shoulders. She was hot too. That made everything better. He and Ino had had much fun ribbing Kiba about his newfound obsession with his dream woman. It was endlessly amusing watching the boys posturing in an attempt to get some attention from the mature woman, doubly so because the pretty woman was far more interested in their laid-back Jonin sensei. Kiba would never forgive Asuma till his dying day for that one fact, or so the mutt grumbled. Still, as amusing as it was, Naruto could see where the boy was coming from. No matter how much he liked Ino, there was something inordinately attractive about a mature woman. Naruto was no expert on feelings, but there was a quiet confidence exuded by a woman who had found her niche in life and was comfortable with it and herself. It was soothing was the best way he could describe it. Rolling mist, thicker than what was natural, caught the light of the sun in Naruto's peripheral vision. So it begins, he thought dramatically. The mist was his signal that Zabuza was finally making his move. He was to wait a full 5 minutes if no one showed themselves, an eternity in the shinobi world, before breaking cover and getting to the bridge as fast as he could. The boy shifted slightly in the tree's upper branches as he tapped out the seconds on the bark. He could forgive himself some nervous anticipation, but it was more than that. Uncontrollable by his own thoughts, he was itching for a fight. The count got to 50 seconds when two figures emerged from the dense foliage surrounding Tezuna's house. They were dressed like thugs, katanas held arrogantly at their sides as they swaggered in like they owned the place. Fucking Ronin, he thought uncharitably. He checked himself for a moment. They could actually be shinobi in disguise. He discarded the notion a moment later. Even the most idiotic of shinobi weren't as arrogant, not at the level these two would be at. His thoughts were confirmed a moment later as they kicked in the door. A smart shinobi, or even a smart thug, would have knocked. The person who answered the door would have been somewhat unawares and easy to subdue and capture. Honestly, no creativity. God damn it. Hold still, woman, came the shout from inside. The sound of muffled screaming came a moment later, followed by wailing that could only belong to Inari. They re-emerged from the abode a few moments later, a struggling Tsunami being dragged from the house. Naruto stood, chakra holding him to the thin branch. A quick glance at the clearing around the home revealed no new enemies, so Naruto felt relatively safe from ambush. His legs flexed once, hard, before he leapt from his perch like a swimmer diving into a pool, arms held out and legs snapped together forming his body into a T-shape. Chakra carried him past the surrounding branches sticking from the tree, and he did a quick, midair roll on his way down, using his life essence to angle his body into a perfectly controlled fall. The thug not holding Tsunami was completely unprepared for 105 pounds of 12-year-old to come crashing down upon him from 60 feet in the air. He said nothing as Naruto plowed into him, having simply let gravity go to work, and he said nothing as his body was crushed into the earth as Naruto discharged the chakra in his legs so as not to break them. You won't hurt my mother. A determined and tear-spilling Inari sprinted outside his home, knife brandished wildly, only to see one of his attackers wordlessly pounded into the ground with all the grace and subtlety of a railroad spike. Hup escaped his lips as Naruto stood calmly on top of the dead man, two kunai held loosely at his sides as he stared down the second man with something akin to divine wrath in his eyes. "Get back in the house, Inari," was all the blonde said, without even turning to face the boy. The boy retreated wordlessly, barely in control of his own body, so in awe of the blonde specter of righteousness before him was he. The remaining Ronin had regained some semblance of his wits, and was brandishing his katana at Tsunami's neck. "Stop right there. I'll kill her. I will kill her," he screamed, his voice shaking. Naruto pinned all the rudimentary killing intent he could muster on the man and was rewarded with the thug breaking out in a cold sweat. "Drop the blade, Ronin," he said in his best, intimidating voice. He imagined it sounded ridiculous coming from a 12-year-old. "You drop the blade, you live. If you make me come and get her, you die. If you kill her, you die. Is this really worth losing your life over?" Contrary to what Naruto wanted, the man simply pulled the blade tighter to Tsunami's neck, eliciting a muted wail from the captive woman. One chance. A sealless Kawarimi had Naruto in Tsunami's place, his chakra easily dwarfing hers. He was inside the man's guard before the man realized a switch had been made, and a simple haymaker to the neck sent him to the ground, his windpipe crushed. Naruto spun one of his two kunai idly before planting it in the man's exposed chest, right through the heart. He had no pity for such men, but allowing any human being to die in such a painful way was distasteful to the 12-year-old genin. The boy turned to the embracing mother and son with a reassuring smile plastered across his face. "You two should get back inside," he cautioned as the two turned to him. Tsunami nodded hurriedly, tears flowing. "Thank you. Thank you so much," she gushed as she steered a sobbing Inari inside with a firm hand, unconsciously shielding him with her body from any other threat, real or imagined. Even now, she thought of her son first. Naruto smiled wistfully at the sight of mother and son, silently lamenting his own lack of a mother, before turning his gaze toward the bridge. He couldn't see it clearly through the trees, but Zabuza's mist was seeping through the foliage. That wasn't good. He gave one more glance to Dazuna's house, where Tsunami was barricading the entrance with furniture. Smart woman, he thought of before channeling chakra and stepping into Shunshin. The world blurred to a combination of green, brown, and gray as tunnel vision made its wonders known to Naruto. He stopped abruptly as the bridge came into view. Heavy mist covered the area, restricting Naruto's view of his teammates, but he could see one thing. Large, reflective shards of what looked to be ice were the only thing that penetrated the mist, the muted light reflecting off of them like mirrors. That can't be good. He broke into a full sprint as the sounds of clashing blades reached his ears. He wasn't stupid enough to charge into a full-scale battle in Shunshin, he'd be cut down in an instant just on reflex. A chakra-enhanced leap carried him into the mist where he landed in an instinctive roll to dodge any projectiles that may have been aimed at him. Asuma had trained him well. The roll saved his head, as he felt a kunai whipping through the air where his head had just been. Naruto, the familiar voice of Ino called through the mist from the direction he kunai had come from, and Naruto balked. Fratricide would have been one hell of a way to go. Damn it, Ino, hold your fire. He sprinted through the mist toward her. She stood flanking Tazuna, her tanto drawn and held at the ready. Her gaze snapped to him with something akin to relief as he approached. The fuck's happening? Asuma-sensei's fighting Zabuza while Kiba's dealing with the hunter Nin, she nearly screamed at him. From the words themselves, he would have thought the situation under wraps. Her tone, however, told a different story. Sensei can take care of himself, I hope. Where's Kiba? Naruto asked in a rush, already prepping his materials. Kunai were loaded with an explosive tag each and deposited into one of the pockets in his shorts. Shuriken were threaded with wire and placed in his middle weapons pouch on the small of his back, the second of 3. I really should have done this earlier. Ino pointed with a shaking hand. In there. That was unlike her in every way. In battle, he had found, she was often at her most collected. For her to be this shaken up. Things weren't looking good. Naruto spun his head so fast he felt a pop in his neck. The reflective construct he had seen from off the bridge loomed ahead of him, the sounds of combat coming from within. How the hell had he missed that? He mentally slapped himself a few times. This wasn't the time to lose focus in battle. How the fuck did he get caught up in there? He asked as he retrieved his explosive-laden kunai from his hip pocket. No idea, Naruto, but be careful, that guy's probably as fast as you, Ino cautioned. That gave Naruto pause, and he glanced back at the mirror structure. He was unable to make out anything but two shapes weaving around each other on the bridge. Great, he drawled. Anything else I should know? He quickly double-checked his resistance seals to make sure they were disengaged. They were. He's good with water, Ino rushed out, tapping the bridge with her hand impatiently as she tried to dredge up any more information she could think of. Arg. That's all I got. Naruto nodded as he turned. Okay, water-natured, fast, mirror-like structure. He trailed off in thought as he tried to formulate a plan. Glancing at the construct before him, he narrowed his eyes. It was abnormally cold on this bridge, even for wave. The answer came to him at the speed of thought. Ice, maybe? It made a twisted sort of sense. Ice was really just water. He had never heard of ice manipulation, but now wasn't the time for that. Kiba was on the other guy's home turf. It was time to get him out. Naruto broke into a light jog as he approached the mirror dome. The two shapes became clear enough to view, and Naruto spied two Kibas. Jujin Bunshin. Kiba. Get back, he screamed. Two pairs of feral eyes snapped to his as he hurled the two explosive tag-laden kunai in between a gap in the mirrors. The boy and his dog leapt back, simultaneously avoiding a hail of sunban speeding toward them, as Naruto's hands formed a ram seal. 2, 1. A single application of chakra activated the charges on the kunai, which detonated with a force of 2 grenades. Shrapnel peppered the inside of the dome, but Naruto didn't stick around to find out what had happened. The concussive force, while impressive, hadn't resulted in a shattering sound, something that would have naturally happened had the mirrors broken. 6 hand seals had him submerged in heavy concrete courtesy of Dochisenko, and a focused application of chakra blew a hole right through the concrete in a place Naruto knew was covered by the dome. He exploded upward from the concrete with a crash as dust filled his vision. Rapid blinking cleared his sight well enough to make out the forms of Kiba and a transformed Akamaru huddling away from his explosion. The two needed no goading to dive through the hole Naruto had created, and the trio of Team 10 teammates scampered back outside the dome. What the hell took you so long? Kiba groused as they pushed their way through concrete and support beams. Naruto was surprised he had managed the earth-natured technique so quickly, given the structure of the bridge. It was amazing what chakra and adrenaline could do when moving in the same direction. Had some shit to deal with, mutt. Aren't you happy I bothered to show up? Naruto snarked as gray light assaulted his eyes. Naruto immediately made space once he emerged from the tunnel, speeding through seals for the futon, Rankuden in order to provide cover. His instinct turned out to be fortuitous, as the hunter Nin appeared from a mirror less than 3 meters from the trio, and made to press his advantage. The screaming Rankuden had other ideas, however, and the masked youth was forced to abort. Danger senses screamed bloody murder at him, and Naruto dropped low to avoid being turned into a pincushion. He palmed 2 kunai and the wind howled as an ethereal light surrounded the blades. He let the true nature of wind chakra take over as he slashed the air while the hunter chucked more sunban toward him, the wild chakra flying off the kunai and deflecting the incoming needles, leaving ruts in the concrete where they impacted the bridge. Get back, he ordered Kiba and Akamaru. They obliged him as he blurred into Shunshin. Only reflex born of life on the run saved the masked hunter as death soared toward him. His right arm came up in a rudimentary, reflexive block that halted Naruto's kunai strike in his forearm. He resisted the urge to scream as wind chakra ripped through skin, muscle, and bone, tearing his arm away with an almighty wrench, and a burst of speed carrying him away from Naruto. The blonde cursed sulfurously as his prey slipped away from him, saved by a lucky break. The hunter wouldn't be letting him get so close a second time. No sense in not trying though. 3 kunai were airborne as Naruto finished seals, a futon, Repusho propelling the blades at thrice their normal speed. A slab of ice appeared from nowhere to block the projectiles, where they embedded themselves nearly hilt-deep in the mirror. A second curse split the air as Naruto realized he wouldn't get another opportunity to end the hunter Nin anytime soon. At least not by himself. The hunter was as fast as him, at least, and wasn't about to let himself be maneuvered. A gust of wind blew a few strands of hair in his face, and he brushed them away idly, his blue eyes scanning what little he could of the bridge. Asuma had his hands full with Zabuza, the man's massive cleaver keeping the Konoha Jonin at a safe distance. Ino was performing a hasty patch job on Kiba and Akamaru, both of whom were suffering from multiple puncture wounds. He was on his own for the moment, as Ino needed to patch up Kiba before he would be any use in a fight. He gripped a kunai as the hunter Nin spun toward him, Sunban in his good hand. The two blades met in the middle, the hunter showing a surprising amount of strength for such a lithe body, as Naruto noticed for the first time. Naruto used his second hand to bring a second blade to bear and slashed out, slicing the hunter's kimono as he spun away. A swift pivot on the balls of his feet had Naruto in position to block a second stab, and the redirected needle passed over his left shoulder harmlessly. The hunter made to move away once more, but Naruto was having none of it. A harsh grab of the arm had the shinobi in a vice grip as Naruto used his body weight to hurl the body to the concrete. A kunai quickly split the ninja's neck. Naruto was already moving as the body exploded into water, a hail of needles peppering the spot he vacated. A second hail from his right forced him backwards, and Naruto used his left kunai to slash out at the specter of the hunter Nin. His blade caught skin once more, but the hunter was one step ahead again. The body dispersed into liquid and Naruto was left off balance as his kunai split water. Water splashed around his feet as he attempted to regain his balance on the slippery ground. He had no time, however, as the hunter asserted himself with a vicious stab at Naruto's exposed neck. Only a desperate grab halted the motion of the shinobi's good hand, and Naruto moved to use momentum to swing the hunter around when he encountered a problem. He couldn't move. A glance downward showed that the hunter was doing more than Naruto had originally thought, as his feet were encased in ice. His eyes widened as they met the ice slits of the hunter's mask. "Now you won't even be able to run from my attacks," a melodious voice spoke from beneath porcelain. Naruto's eyes were drawn to the hunter's bad arm, the one he had stabbed, and he beheld the boy making one-handed seals. How is that possible? He mentally screamed. His harried breath billowed out in a white cloud, and he belated realized that it suddenly had gotten colder. Much colder. A stomp to the water-laden bridge sent water skyward, where it coalesced into needles made of pure ice. "I don't want to kill you," the hunter spoke, voice sounding solemn. "But I will kill my heart in this case. You are far too dangerous. I am sorry." The Senbon twitched once in midair before shooting toward him at speeds too fast to dodge. Naruto's eyes widened as death soared toward him. "Suga," was all Naruto had time to hear before his body was brutally slammed into by a spinning gray projectile. Ice cracked and he was airborne before he knew it, but the all-too-short flight came to an abrupt end on the hard concrete. He had little time to feel disoriented as a slap to the face brought him back to reality. "Wake the fuck up, Naruto," he heard Kiba howl at him. Blonde hair flailed about his head as he shook it to clear his head. He immediately wished he hadn't, as nothing but bruising pain hit him in the chest. "What the fuck, Kiba?" he coughed when the memory of being barreled into by Tsuga reasserted itself in his mind. "Sorry, man, it was all I could think of to get you out of that," Kiba apologized as Naruto pushed himself up, doing his best to ignore the pain where he knew his ribcage to be. "Better battered and bruised than dead, right?" "Don't count on it," Naruto groused as his preliminary test of his ribs revealed sharp pain in 3 too many places. They were broken, but not shattered. That was good. "Well, suck it up. Ino's covering us right now, but her genjutsu's gonna break at some point." Naruto nodded, wincing in pain as his ribs started involuntarily grinding together of all things. He coughed, once, as blinding pain hit his senses for a single moment before a pleasant heat enveloped the damaged ribs. Abruptly, and with no goading from Naruto himself, the pain disappeared, taking the pleasant warmth with it. He quickly patted himself down, only to feel no pain whatsoever. What the hell? There's no way broken ribs can heal that quick. Not even with chakra therapy. Naruto. Listen the fuck up, man. We need a plan, Kiba was shouting at him. He shook himself once more, breaking any and all thoughts about how he had somehow managed to spontaneously heal 3 cracked ribs. There were more pressing matters to attend to. Yeah, I hear ya. Where's Ino? Kiba pointed to a spot on the bridge mostly obscured by mist. Naruto could barely make out 2 figures huddled together. She's doing a double layer on the hunter, Kiba clarified for Naruto. A quick glance showed the hunter hurling Senbon at an imaginary opponent. It won't hold long. Alright, move. We're gonna trap him. I'll flush him out once Ino drops the illusion. Naruto quickly tossed a kunai to a spot on the bridge near where the hunter was flailing about. Hit him here with all you've got. We need to make this work, and I don't trust us to get another shot at this guy. He's not too strong close in, but he's crafty. Kiba nodded resolutely. Got it. Put your radio in. Ino and me are on channel 2. Naruto didn't bother nodding as he ghosted through the mist toward the illusion-entrapped hunter. He threaded the wire for his radio through his ear absently as he strafed. His first inclination would be to kill the hunter outright, but Asuma would want information from him after the fight was through. They needed to take him alive, and that was just so much harder. He palmed a kunai as the hunter was finally in range. Ino, he growled over the comm. He wasn't quite sure when the illusion dropped, but that wasn't his concern as he slashed out at neck level with the hunter. Eyes widened behind porcelain as Naruto came into view once the illusion fell, and the hunter ducked on reflex. Naruto's eyes gleamed as his kunai sliced through long black hair, and the hunter moved to make space. Not so fast. Naruto thought as he brought his leg up and out in vicious, chakra-enhanced thrust kick. The hunter attempted to block with both forearms, but the kick proved too much as the shinobi was sent sailing through the air, directly toward the kunai Naruto had thrown before. Kiba appeared from nowhere and was nothing but a gray blur as he executed his clan's signature technique with a scream of tsuga. The hunter nin was slammed with an almighty crack, and soared for a precious few moments before landing in a heap, unmoving. Naruto gripped his kunai loosely as he warily approached the hunter, who was now struggling to raise himself from the ground. The disguised shinobi fell back to the concrete with a muted thump and a rustling of cloth. I wouldn't try that if I were you, Naruto cautioned as he approached. You probably have a few cracked ribs, if not shattered ones, and judging by the state of your arm, that's broken too. The left arm, the one Naruto hadn't stabbed earlier, was bent at an unnatural angle adjacent to the shinobi's body. The blonde took a moment to admire the pure power that the Inuzuka technique had, inwardly happy that the same hadn't happened to him earlier. He flipped the body over with his foot cautiously, though none too gently, to take in the surprising sight of a bloodied front and a cracked mask, revealing a blood-spattered, feminine face. She was quite pretty, in Naruto's opinion. It was just too bad she was fighting on the wrong side of things today. Alright, up you get, he said as he lifted the girl bodily into his arms and half-carried, half-dragged her to the edge of the bridge, where he leaned her against the railing. Kiba joined him a moment later, while Ino slowly worked Tazuna over to their position. Caution was always the best part of valor. So, what do we do with her? Kiba questioned, his gaze locked on their captive. His eyes were oddly appraising, calculating even. It was far from the usual reaction he had when faced with a pretty girl. Even he realized the situation they were in. Naruto sighed. He had planned the combat expertly while in the heat of the moment, and now he hadn't the faintest idea of what to do. Life was funny like that sometimes. I've got no idea, he finally admitted. I figured Asuma would want someone to question afterwards, and we all know we wouldn't get shit from Zabuza. So are we just supposed to wait here for Sensei? Ino asked as she arrived on the scene with Tazuna in tow, wind whipping through her hair from the discharge of one of Asuma's futon jutsu. She gave both Naruto and Kiba a once-over, checking them for injuries. Her eyes lingered on Naruto for a few extra moments. He locked eyes with the girl and nodded once, conveying that he was all right. He sighed once more. I guess? It came out as more of a question. Kill me. The soft voice of the hunter piped up weakly. Four heads spun to regard the girl in stunned silence. What? Ino finally squeaked. Enemies asking to be killed wasn't something Team 10 was familiar with. Naruto and Kiba just stared. I want to protect the person important to me. I want to work for that person. I want to fight for that person. I want to make that person's dream come true. That is my dream, the girl muttered, more to herself than to Team 10 and Tazuna. I failed in my dream. I've realized, my existence is no longer needed. Naruto shook himself from his stupor. What's your name? He asked gently, far more gently than he had ever asked anyone anything before. It was almost as if he feared the girl would break if he raised his voice. Haku, was the whispered reply. Well, Haku, we're gonna get you patched up a bit. He held his hand up to stall any protest the girl may have had. We're not gonna kill you, Haku, so you may as well get used to it. We have some questions we need to ask you. The girl seemed to pull herself together for a single moment, almost looking outraged at the notion that they wouldn't honor her wish to be killed, but then wilted, falling back against the support beam. Naruto turned to Ino. See what you can do for her. We don't need her past dash. An earth-shattering explosion rocked the bridge suddenly, followed by a large gust of wind that cleared the mist from the bridge in one fell swoop. Naruto steadied himself against the bridge's railing as he gazed into the area where the explosion came from. His eyes widened. Trench knives in hand, Asuma stood in the remnants of a great ash cloud, battered, bruised, and cut. His vest was nearly sliced in half, and the bloodstains could be seen clearly even from a distance. The Jonin stood like a great statue of a hero of the old times, weapons brandished as he engaged a monster of legend and brought it to its knees. The eyes of the blonde were drawn to the second form on the bridge. Zabuza kneeled in the center of the concrete construct, cleaver discarded in front of him in the wake of the excessive amount of third-degree burns covering his exposed skin, the explosion having burned through his sleeveless top. A shinobi who's willing to sacrifice everything for his goals, Asuma said as he strode toward Zabuza, trench knives glowing with extended wind chakra sharpened to a 4-foot blade. Everything, including the very people you seek to control. That's not what a shinobi does. Zabuza glared. I don't give a shit what you think a shinobi should do. I fight for my own goals. You fought for your own goals, Asuma corrected. And you die for your own goals. 3 things happened at once. Asuma brought his blade down in a vertical slash that would bisect Zabuza, the Kirigakure no Kijin raised his head to death, and Ino gave a squeal of surprise as she was unceremoniously bowled over. It was the third that caught Naruto's attention. He turned to regard his teammate, only to find her sprawled on the bridge. Haku was gone, an ice mirror left in her place. Oh no! In a single, momentary heartbeat of total clarity, Naruto knew exactly what would happen. He spun to face Asuma and Zabuza to warn his sensei, but by then it was far too late. A single ice mirror stood between Haku and Zabuza, slowly melting as its creator bled out onto the concrete, Asuma's trench knife having neatly eviscerated the hunter Nin. The Jonin stood transfixed by the sight of the young girl in front of him, shocked beyond words. Zabuza was the only one who didn't seem to be moving in slow motion, his body already moving to capitalize on the opportunity. It was all over in the blink of an eye, in one slash of the blade. And Team 10 watched, transfixed. Heh, one hell of a kid, giving a chance like that. Sure can pick him. Zabuza stood, cleaver in hand, a vicious smirk upon his face as he towered over the bodies of Asuma and Haku, their heads separated from their necks as blood flowed freely onto the bridge. Heh? Who'da thought picking up some runt off the street would pay off so well? Zabuza's voice carried over the bridge effortlessly, even with the mist and its auditory amplification effects gone. The Kirigakure no Kijin stood over the headless bodies of Asuma and Haku, hunched over from exhaustion as he fingered the handle of his massive cleaver. Blood covered him, having spurted as if a fountain from the necks of his two victims. His black muscle shirt was stained with dark splotches that looked right at home on the man named the Demon of the Mist. Kobikira Bocho shone like the sun was bathing it in light, despite the clouds and low-lying mist. Its presence made for a chilling picture when next to its blood-drenched wielder. An idle swipe of his hand removed his bandages. Blood-soaked as they were, it was getting hard to breathe. He tossed them to the concrete without a glance. And now for the brats, he former Kiri Anbu growled with a sinister snarl. Naruto noticed none of this, however, so focused he was on the prone form of Asuma, headless in death. Blood flowed freely from the two parts that had once been his sensei, drenching he formerly gray concrete and dyeing it red. Sensei? He thought weakly in his mind. His inner thoughts no more than a whisper as shock set in. All at once, memories of the battle on the bridge assaulted his mind without warning. Naruto's eyes widened for but a moment as red-hot needles threatened to break from his skull and spill out. He gripped a kunai as the hunter nin spun toward him, Sunbon in his good hand. The two blades met in the middle, the hunter showing a surprising amount of strength for such a lithe body, as Naruto noticed for the first time. Naruto used his second hand to bring a second blade to bear and slashed out, slicing the hunter's kimono as he spun away. I don't want to kill you, the hunter spoke, voice sounding solemn. But I will kill my heart in this case. You are far too dangerous. I am sorry. Naruto's eyes gleamed as his kunai sliced through long black hair, and the hunter moved to make space. Not so fast. Naruto thought as he brought his leg up and out in vicious, chakra-enhanced thrust kick. The hunter attempted to block with both forearms, but the kick proved too much as the shinobi was sent sailing through the air, directly toward the kunai Naruto had thrown before. Heh, one hell of a kid, giving a chance like that. Sure can pick him. Zabuza stood, cleaver in hand, a vicious smirk upon his face as he towered over the bodies of Asuma and Haku, their heads separated from their necks as blood flowed freely onto the bridge. Blue eyes widened as Naruto was ripped from his thoughts by Zabuza's taunting voice. Is this the first time you've seen someone fall in battle? The demon asked, disgust dripping from his voice. He scoffed. Greenhorn Genin. To think, Haku had so much trouble with you. I suppose he was weak after all. The boy never could kill that heart of his. Naruto, and Team 10, was silent as Zabuza rambled. A scream threatened to break from Naruto's lips as his eyes stayed rooted on the rapidly cooling corpse of his sensei. This isn't happening. It's not true. He screamed internally. It couldn't be happening. Not after everything they'd been through. Asuma just couldn't be dead. The genin dimly realized that Zabuza was speaking again. When I was your age, I already had blood on my hands. Liters of it, from dozens of kills. The man trailed off, seemingly in fond remembrance. The demon Zabuza, they called me. A boy who slaughtered an entire graduating class of Miss Genin when he was only 9. A smile uglier than anything Naruto had ever seen broke across Zabuza's face. And it felt so good. Naruto closed his eyes as the man's words washed over him. He was hearing them as if from very far away, his attention still focused entirely on Asuma. Thump. His heartbeat thumped out the seconds in his ears, overshadowing the demon of the mist's words effortlessly. Thump. The click of the handle of Kobikiri Bocho sounded as Zabuza hefted the blade to the level of his shoulder without effort. Until your names appear in my bingo book, you're not real shinobi in my mind. A short chuckle that sounded more like a cough escaped his throat. The man gently massaged his bruises that the Konoha Jonin had left with him. Heh, too bad you won't live long enough to get there. Thump. I'll never forgive you. Naruto yelled in his mind, his voice no longer a whisper in the dark. His eyes were squeezed shut, as if not opening them would make Asuma's death less real. Blood coated the underside of his fingernails as they dug into his clenched fists. Images of a sewer, a great cage lined with hundreds of bars, flashed in front of his eyes. Crimson eyes snapped open in the dark as if from a great slumber, and Naruto felt painful warmth wash over him, coating his muscles and bones as if from the inside. "It's about time." "Too bad really," Zabuza was saying. "You kids VE got talent. The battlefield's no place for children, though." Thump. Finger and toenails sharpened into claws, muscles bulged for a moment before relaxing as lactic acid was flushed from them, chakra flowing at an accelerated rate through Naruto's whole body. Chakra crackled like electricity down nerve endings, sending instantaneous impulses that impacted the adrenal glands, the chemical heightening Naruto's reflexes beyond anything capable by a shinobi of his age. Whisker marks elongated and deepened along Naruto's face, and Zabuza finally took notice of the increased chakra output literally spilling from the genin. Black eyes narrowed to slits as he gripped his cleaver and leapt forward, his shinobi instinct to kill the genin before anything untoward happened overriding his curiosity. It was too late. Pupils slit down the center, red eyes snapped open as a wave of killing intent that brought Tazuna, Ino, and Kiba to their knees struck Zabuza like a hammer blow. His forward progress was halted abruptly as his eyes widened. What the fuck? No genin should be able to produce this kind of murderous intent. Naruto, however, cared little for Zabuza's concerns, as his eyes finally left the prone corpse of his sensei, zeroing in on the object of his rage. "I'll kill you." Concrete cracked, dust sprayed upward, and chakra exploded as Naruto burst forward towards Zabuza in a show of raw speed that his sensei wouldn't have been able to match. Only instincts born of countless battles saved Zabuza as death soared toward him. A hasty duck and a thrust of Kubikiribocho put the massive blade in the path of the genin's new claws, and Zabuza's black eyes watched in shock as the tempered steel was carved into, the sound of metal cracking and scraping sending shivers down his spine. He didn't know what the fuck had happened to the blonde kid, but he knew that he had to make space fast. Naruto, however, wasn't about to let that happen. Clawed swipes that resembled punches tore through the air at Zabuza, the former jonin using all of his speed and reflexes just to avoid being rent in two. He wasn't fast enough, though, and Naruto's claws met vulnerable flesh with a sickening tear as Zabuza's pain sensors overrode his pride. The demon of the mist screamed. The pain ignited his reflexes, however, and the former ANBU leapt away from Naruto with speed born of desperation, blood dripping from 4 gashes in his chest. Naruto led him, his mind at war with baser instincts and rage that threatened to overwhelm him totally. Inside Naruto's mind, the boy knelt, hands clasped to his head as if in pain as red chakra swirled about in the sewer that was his mindscape. On the outside, his body moved on instinct. The boy shifted into a crouch for but an instant before he was gone from sight. Zabuza was far more ready for round 2, though, the red corona of visible power surrounding the genin giving away his position through the rudimentary shunshin long before Zabuza saw him. Muscle screamed as Zabuza torqued his body more sharply than ever had before, Kubikiribocho's flat edge swinging in a wide arc that impacted the charging Naruto with a hard thump and a crack that heralded shattered ribs. The blonde genin was airborne before he knew what to do with himself, and pain assaulted him for but a moment before the healing abilities of the Kyuubi's Yuki asserted itself. He landed heavily on his back and stayed there for less than a moment, springing back to his feet from his hands. The blow to his chest had done more than just hurt, however. Naruto's consciousness had awoken from its internal struggle, and the boy was finally back in control of his finer motor functions. Naruto glanced down at his hands in detached wonder, and with more than a little fear, beholding the claws that had grown from his fingers. His mind was in 3 places at once, all wondering what the hell happened to him, before common sense and knowledge was reasserted themselves in his brain. Kyuubi, was all he thought, though his inner voice was quiet and hard to hear over the pounding in his ears. It was all that needed to be thought, for it answered all of the questions the blonde could have about what he was currently experiencing. No aches, no pain. Hell, he felt great. The feeling didn't last long, as near precognitive reactions had him ducking backwards under a sword swipe that would have made him as headless as his sensei. A swift, effortless backflip that revealed dexterity that Naruto hadn't previously possessed created space between the two combatants. Naruto was barely on his feet before he had retrieved and released a kunai from his hip pouch, accelerated reflexes working perfectly with his accelerated arm motion so as to make a perfect throw. Zabuza raised his cleaver to block the knife, and it clanged off the tempered steel before coming to rest on the concrete of Tazuna's bridge. Naruto paid no mind as his body slipped into a Goken stance, the result of nigh endless hours of mind-numbing and knuckle-breaking training making the shift effortless. One hand was clasped behind his back, the other in front, claws raised to the sky as Naruto stared Zabuza down, murder in his eyes. The whole universe seemed to grind to a halt for a moment as the two shinobi locked eyes. No words were spoken, but then, none were needed. Naruto exploded force with all the grace and subtlety of a hurricane as the world kicked into high gear once more. Zabuza crouched low and raised his left arm to block a telegraphed roundhouse kick that promised to break stone. The blow never came, however, as the blonde merely passed through Zabuza's outstretched arm like a ghost. Bunshin. The former Jonin thought in alarm. A quick pivot saved his head, literally, as Naruto's claws passed mere millimeters from Zabuza's neck in a controlled swipe. Swiftly pressing his advantage, Naruto burst into Zabuza's guard with a furious flurry of punches and clawed slashes, determined, though not consciously aware of it, to keep the Kirigakure no Kijin in a taijutsu battle. He wanted no part of the man's ninjutsu. Zabuza made to make space, and Naruto lunged forward before he distantly realized that he had been had. The demon of the mist pressed forward before Naruto knew what had happened, bringing his decapitating knife to bear in a reverse grip strike at Naruto's chest level. Reflexes beyond human comprehension had muscles firing on all cylinders in Naruto's chakra-enhanced body, and the genin was barely in control of his own motions as he planted one hand on the blade and pushed, using the momentum and direction to spin his body over the sweeping strike in a barrel roll. He landed on all fours, grabbed a kunai from his hip pouch, and buried it in Zabuza's right shoulder with a savage snarl. Blood spurted from the wound, but Zabuza was both expecting and conditioned to the pain. The former ANBU ignored it, let momentum go to work, and simply kept spinning, planning to let his blade decapitate Naruto on the back end of his sweep. His instincts didn't let him finish, however, and his spin was halted as he jumped deftly in order to avoid having his legs swept by the chakra-empowered genin. Naruto met the former Jonin with reflexes and reaction time beyond Zabuza's comprehension, and certainly beyond what Naruto had been capable of before. A quick pivot on his hands and a thrust. Kick had Naruto shooting the Kirigakure no Kijin skyward as his blow landed on the underside of Zabuza's chin. The genin landed on all fours once more, before disappearing in a burst of red chakra. The Omote range required speed and power almost unreachable by normal ninja, and the creator of it had compensated for it by opening the first of the celestial gates. Naruto was no normal ninja when under the influence of the Kyuubi's chakra though, and, while the technique was almost unusable in his hands under normal circumstances, being unable to open the gates, the demon's Yuki more than made up the difference. He reappeared behind the prone and airborne Zabuza in a perfect Kagebuyo, before planting 4 of his sharpened nails in the man's exposed back. Using his grip for leverage, Naruto flipped and positioned his body so that his head was at Zabuza's feet. The genin locked his arms around the man's legs, his ankles snapping to either side of Zabuza's neck to keep him totally immobile. Chakra exploded into a visible corona as Naruto forced his body to spin in midair as gravity went to work. The two combatants were an indistinguishable blur to any observing eyes as they fell, Naruto's chakra rapidly gathering in his feet. That chakra exploded outward as Zabuza's head met the concrete, liquefying flesh, bone, and brain matter while simultaneously providing Naruto with a cushion. The impact was felt by everyone on the bridge as the two shinobi came back down to earth with an almighty crash. Dust was sent skyward and the force channeled by the supports rippled across the concrete, knocking Kiba, Ino, and Tazuna to their back as 20-foot radial fractures spread from the point of impact. Naruto hopped off the now headless Zabuza without ceremony, red chakra still racing around and across his body as he silently regarded the corpse. The genin was silent as his red eyes rose to meet those of his teammates. Distantly, he felt sorrow for what their reactions would be to his big secret being revealed. It was overridden, however, by the blood pounding in his ears. The smell of fear hit Naruto before the sound of clapping made itself known. The boy turned slowly to regard a small horde of mercenaries, a stubby man in a business suit at the head. It was unmistakably Gato. Well, the man began, his voice surprisingly steady as he strode forward with a swagger that belied his fear. Fear that Naruto could smell. I had brought all these nice men with me today in order to deal with Zabuza, but you seem to have done me a favor, boy. Thank you. The short man laughed at the irony of the situation. I never intend to pay any of the shinobi I hire, you see, they cost far too much. I let them do their work, tire themselves out, and then kill them off with numbers. It's a nice little operation I use. The man smirked viciously as he stepped over Zabuza's blade. Disgust rippled through Naruto despite his detachment from his feelings. It was a testament to how much he hated this man that he could actually feel it through the pleasant yet painful haze of the Kyuubi's Yuki. Gato would die this day, he just didn't know it yet. Gato was all the rage-fueled boy managed to grate out. It seemed to please the man, though the guttural growl by which it had been delivered seemed to unnerve the man. Indeed I am, boy, the stumpy man said. I'd ask for your name, but I'm not all that interested in dead people. The thugs behind him laughed menacingly, brandishing their assorted weapons in what they thought was a threatening manner. Naruto was far from impressed as he began a slow march forward. That only seemed to amuse the man further, though the smell of fear wafting off the man increased. Look at this one, men. Gato crowed as the assorted thugs laughed at Naruto's stupidity. Don't try to be a hero, kid. It'll only hurt before you die. Naruto said nothing as he continued his march, nearing the assembled group with palpable murder in his eyes. A kunai found itself in Naruto's hand and began spinning around his finger. Gato had stopped laughing as the genin got ever closer, taking a step back in apprehension as the boy refused to stop. He was an instant away from ordering his men to attack the crazy kid, but he never got the chance. Naruto's kunai was buried to the hilt in the chest of the thug standing directly behind Gato, having passed through the shipping magnate's exposed throat like a hot knife through butter. The stumpy man dropped to his knees as if in shock, blood spilling from the gaping wound like water from a broken canteen. Naruto paid him little mind as he shoved him aside, now at a full sprint, reaching down to snatch Zabuza's cleaver from its resting place on the bridge. Neither the balance point, fine though it was, nor the weight registered in Naruto's mind. All that the boy cared about, however distantly, was that it channeled chakra like nothing else he had ever laid his hands on. Disruptive wind chakra infused with Yuki crackled madly as it rippled down Kubikirabocho, and Naruto turned his body so that the assembled thugs could see his back. Coiling and uncoiling like a spring, Naruto hurled the massive decapitating knife at the crowd of mercenaries at speeds almost too fast to track. The sword, spinning like a shuriken, passed through the first man unlucky enough to be in its path as easily as if he were made of water. Wind-enhanced as it was, it didn't stop there, living up to its name as it cleaved through 3 more men before it escaped the 4 lines the thugs had formed at the entrance to the bridge, finally coming to a stop as it hit the ground, its momentum spent. Blood spilled from the halves of the victims like water from a broken canteen. One poor soul had been unfortunate enough to be close to the spinning blade's path, but not close enough to have been granted the mercy of death. His arm lay on the ground, neatly sliced off above the elbow as blood flowed from the wound. Another lay dead on the concrete, having had his chest tagged with disruptive chakra that splayed off the blade in rivulets. The living man's screams drew the rest of the assembled thugs' attention from the dead bodies as they turned as one to watch in morbid fascination as the man, formerly a samurai, quickly bled out. Naruto paid no such attention. Bursting forth, the boy left cracks in the concrete as latent chakra was forced into the bridge from Naruto's speed. A blurring afterimage of the blonde was left in his place, so great was his chakra-enhanced speed as he hurtled toward the small army. Cracks and dust exploded from the bridge as Naruto stopped in front of the nearest mercenary, crouched with a hand on the ground and his foot poised to snap to the man's chin. One moment, the man stood, transfixed by the sight of the monster in front of him. The next, he was airborne with a sickening crack that spoke of a broken spine as Naruto neatly snapped a thrust kick to his chin. The genin didn't even bother with the Kage Bio in favor of moving on to his next victim. Naruto subconsciously slipped into Goken, the deadly and bruising style of a man whose tutelage had boosted Naruto to second in his class. A spinning back fist shattered the skull of one mercenary. An improvised punch that sent claws forward instead of knuckles claimed the life of the next. Vulnerable flesh was rent effortlessly as Naruto literally ripped the throat out of one man unlucky enough to be in his path. It took a total of 6 seconds and 9 dead men to capture the full attention of the assembled mercenaries. Weapons were drawn hastily, hefted in front of them as an impotent defense against the miniature monster in front of them, poised to slaughter them all on a whim. Naruto had stopped, however, directly above the still sputtering and paralyzed Gato. A kunai slipped into his hand from his hip pouch and began to spin around one of his fingers. It had a hypnotic effect on the small army, as the eyes of every man on the bridge was drawn to the small, spinning knife. They all knew what was about to happen, were powerless to stop it, and couldn't look away even if they had wanted to. Without ceremony, without warning, Naruto buried the kunai hilt deep in Gata's back, blood spurting forth from the wound in rivulets as the blade severed the aorta savagely. It was withdrawn just a brutally red life water covering it and dripping down to the now liberally stained concrete. The kunai began spinning on Naruto's finger once more, flecks of blood flying off in all directions, most landing on the right side of Naruto's face. Blood dripped off the boy's claws and splashed to the concrete, the soft noise all the more deafening in the silence of the bridge. That was all it took for the dam to break. All it took was a single man to turn and flee, before all the rest got the idea that they had a much better chance of surviving if they weren't anywhere near the blonde ninja-turned-monster. Most of the men sprinted back toward the forested land that was fire country, while a few others dove off the bridge and into the water in their attempt to escape. Naruto stood silently throughout the whole process, watching with a dispassionate eye as many men tripped over themselves in their haste. The fox's chakra was slowly leaving his chakra coils, the process seemingly instinctive despite Naruto not having any experience with it. Without boosting his system beyond human capabilities, Naruto once more felt every little ache and pain in his body. He ignored them, however, in favor of watching the crashing waves that gave this country its name. His mental faculties had returned to full strength, finally. To think, he had thought of this country as beautiful just earlier this day, as someplace that he would love to return to. Now, it would only be a memory. A bloodstained memory filled with sorrow, self-loathing for all that he had done, and pain. He would never return here. Naruto himself turned, numbly, after several long moments that seemed to last an eternity and an instant all at once, and began moving back to his still shell-shocked teammates, red eyes reverting to blue as the Kyuubi's chakra left his system. Seafoam blue and brown eyes regarded him as he passed in between the surviving member of Team 10, past the quivering Tazuna, and to the limp and headless body of Sarutobi Asuma. The stupefied eyes of Ino and Kiba watched silently as Uzumaki Naruto dropped to his knees in front of the man who had been the closest thing he had had to a father, and wept. His body shuddered with emotion for a moment, before going limp, exhaustion finally taking hold of him. Looking back, he supposed it was rather like a dream. You never know how exactly you get to where you are, but you're always there. Right in the middle of the action. Right when it matters most. There is no true beginning to it, or if there is, you never remember it. The only thing that could possibly disprove the thought that it was a dream was the fact that he could remember it as vividly as anything. You can never remember dreams after the fact, at least not with any true clarity. He supposed that it could have been a nightmare, but he had lived through a nightmarish existence for the majority of his childhood, if it could be called that. He knew enough about them to know that this wasn't one, no matter how much he would have liked to believe it. The red glow from farther down the long sewer in which he stood spoke of something sinister, something that Naruto, for the life of him, wanted absolutely no part of. The boy knew, however, that that very glow was exactly what he was here for, no matter how much he wished it wasn't the case. With trepidation born of knowledge imparted on him by the Sandame, Naruto started forward. Water shifted beneath his feet as he approached the crimson glow, chakra control exercises placing on its surface with nary a thought. The boy spared no thought for how he was supposedly controlling chakra within the seal. Minuscule details like that didn't matter right now. Only the palpable aura of murderous intent so thick it could be cut with a kunai mattered at present. Had Naruto not known it was coming, his knees would have buckled. As it was, they almost did. Naruto found himself standing on top of water that would have been up to his knees had he not boosted himself, facing a cage barred by steel beams 200 feet high held closed, impossibly, by a slip of paper. So that's the seal, he thought with a detached sort of wonder. Without warning, crimson eyes 50 feet above Naruto's own opened, the pupils focused on Naruto's own with uncanny clarity, menace and hatred beyond the scope of his imagination held within the twin orbs. Then, somehow, the murderous intent became even more pronounced, thicker and heavier. Naruto just barely kept himself standing, though he did sink into the water. He was suffocating. Hands rose to his throat by their own accord, trying to find something to unlatch to allow oxygen into his system. That wasn't the problem though. There wasn't something coiled around his windpipe, restricting his access to air no matter how much he tried to breathe. Nothing was wrapped around his chest, crushing his ribs and lungs. He just couldn't breathe. His lungs wouldn't expand, his diaphragm wouldn't move, his own mouth would barely work to try to force air down his throat. Just as he was about to lose the battle and fall, the pressure disappeared. It didn't recede or slowly reduce itself. It simply vanished as if it had never been there in the first place. Naruto took gulps of air with all the vigor of a starving man given a feast to eat. His mind, however, was focused entirely on the monster looming in front of him. Unknowingly, unconsciously, his respect for the yondaime, which had taken a nosedive when he had learned of his situation, shot up to its old, godlike levels. How did he fight such a beast? Naruto wondered, in awe of the man who had not only fought the Biju, but defeated it. Suddenly, the idea of the yondaime being acknowledged as the greatest shinobi in the history of the world wasn't so far-fetched. That, though, mattered little at present. I would like nothing more than to devour you whole, boy, but that would defeat the purpose of this little chat, the Kyuubi spoke in a deep, gravelly, unyielding voice that brooked no argument. Kyuubi, was Naruto's whispered response. Internally, the genin cursed the waver of obvious fear in his voice, but was powerless to stop it. It was an instinctive, primal fear that asserted itself when faced with a being so obviously more powerful than he was. A wave of hot air smacked him in the face, and Naruto realized belatedly that the fox had just exhaled. Yes, boy. I suppose I should be pleased that you at least know that much. I had expected little from a human who had managed to turn his mindscape into a sewer, the fox said with an audible note of sarcasm. Naruto felt vaguely insulted, but conceded the point. There wasn't much he could do to refute it, in any event. He was standing in a sewer. So, he began, his voice made steady through a force of will he hadn't known he possessed. What do you want? Another blast of air hit him square in the face. What do I want, brat? The beast asked, seemingly askance that Naruto would ask such a question. What I want is to devour you where you stand. What I want is to break free from this prison and finish what I started in that pitiful village you call home. To set that hovel aflame with my power, devour each and every one of those fools who celebrated my so-called death, destroy every monument to your precious yondaime, and find and torture the human who calls himself Uchiha Madara for the rest of eternity. Naruto was growing steadily more horrified with each passing word, his ability to breathe leaving him once more as the massive killing intent returned bit by bit, choking him all the while. And, once more, it evaporated as if it had never been present. Unfortunately, boy, the beast said, its rant finished, that is impossible at present. The huge eyes snapped to Naruto's own once more. Unless, of course, you would be so kind as to remove that slip of paper. The phrase was said mockingly. The fox knew full well that Naruto would do no such thing. Not after that last declaration. Still, Naruto shook his head. A deep rumbling that shook the very ground Naruto stood upon reverberated throughout the sewer that was Naruto's mindscape. It took a moment for Naruto to realize the Kyuubi was laughing. It wasn't a pleasant sound. I thought not. Red eyes bored into Naruto, making him fidget as fear took hold even without the monstrous killing intent. He was nothing to this being, and he knew it. Almost unconsciously, he brought his meager chakra to bear in a preemptive attempt to stave off what little of the fox's chakra he could. The fox, however, simply ignored the life energy, not bothering to deign it with a response of every kind. It didn't even bother to mock Naruto. "You asked me what I want, boy, and I told you. What you're here for is something different," the Kyuubi spoke. It had Naruto's attention. "I wish to deal." Naruto's eyebrows threatened to take flight. "Deal?" he asked incredulously, working up some nerve to actually talk back to the monster in front of him. "Do you think I'm a fool, Kyuubi?" He hadn't been privy to many folktales as a child, but he knew better than to strike a deal with a being that might as well be the devil. That nerve promptly disappeared when the beast narrowed its eyes, though the killing intent didn't return. "You would be a fool not to, boy. You have seen and experienced firsthand what my power is capable of," the fox growled. "My chakra allowed you to reach a level of power you thought unimaginable. My power allowed for you to kill men against whom your meager skills would have left you dead." Naruto shook his head quickly. Despite the truth in the words, truth he had been forced to acknowledge even as he had killed Zabuza with ease, he wasn't about to make a deal with the Nine Tails. "I don't want your power, Kyuubi. I don't want your power," Beast came to mind, but he decided against tempting the monster's temper. The rumbling laughter returned. "Don't you, brat? I have been privy to your innermost thoughts since you were old enough to have them. Power is all you desire in this world, boy. The power to crush all of your enemies and leave them dead at your feet. The power to defend your so-called friends." The fox bared its teeth in a grotesque imitation of a grin. "The power to survive." Naruto looked to his feet. He knew the fox was right. The past 4 years of his life had been spent trying to get stronger in what often seemed to be a futile attempt to survive against what were likely S-rank shinobi after his life. Power was all that mattered to them, so it had become almost all that mattered to Naruto. "I offer you all the power you would need and more. Power beyond what you had previously thought capable would be at your disposal. The very ability to crush those who would see you dead would be at your very fingertips," the Kyuubi said, its gravelly voice pouring golden honey into Naruto's ears. Naruto's eyes clouded with doubt. There was little to refute the beast's claims, for Naruto indeed had been witness to the very power the beast spoke of. Having a source of chakra that would never run dry and which could boost his own abilities beyond anything humanly possible certainly wasn't a bad thing, especially given the very people who Naruto sought to destroy were so far beyond him. It would be like the ultimate trump card. Still though, he was wary. "And if I say no?" he asked, his voice betraying the fact that he wouldn't, in fact, say no. It was a question asked simply for the sake of it. The beast's head moved up and down in what could pass for a shrug. It imitated human idiosyncrasies quite well. "Imagine that same power you would deny turned against you," it said simply. Naruto looked up sharply. "That old man you bow to made you well aware of our relationship. My chakra passes through this seal and into you. You know this, so know that everything you hold dear, those very skills you bled for, can be taken from you on a whim. Know that everything you pride yourself on exists at my tolerance." Naruto did what little he could in order to maintain his decorum, but was failing miserably. He knew that the Kyuubi's chakra passed through the seal, the Sandaime had told him as much, but he hadn't thought that the fox would be able to do anything with it once it left the seal. Even taken forcibly from the Kyuubi, it made sense that the beast would still be able to exert some control over its power. Much like how Genjutsu allowed for ninja to use their chakra to manipulate their targets while in their own body. Naruto nodded in acceptance of the beast's point. He certainly didn't want what the fox was describing. "And if I accept your deal," he stressed the last word with regained nerve and emphasis. "What you receive in return. Nothing like what you're proposing is free. Not from a being like you," went unspoken. The fox did not smile, though Naruto could sense that the Biju was pleased. "In return, I ask 2 things. Naruto nodded hesitantly. That sounded rather reasonable. "Firstly, that you would use the power gifted to you whenever necessary. You and I both know that when you die, I get dragged with you. An audible note of rage colored the fox's voice at this. I have no wish for that to happen before absolutely necessary. You know about this, seal, the beast spat the word seal like a curse, from that man whom you bow to. Your own chakra reinforces it unconsciously, unless otherwise occupied. When Naruto looked up, askance as the beast's threat from earlier played over in his mind, the Kyuubi cut him off before he even got going. Do not presume that I cannot follow through, boy, merely that it would be difficult. The fox pinned him with a piercing stare. I believe neither you nor I wish for it to come to that, it growled. Naruto nodded once more. He most certainly didn't wish to have the beast's power turned against him. He had planned to use the power anyway, though he would only use the chakra as a last resort. Despite the obvious boons, there were also drawbacks that the beast had smoothly ignored. He knew that Yuki was poisonous to humans in large enough quantities. He had done some serious research on the Biju after his secret had been revealed to him, and he had no wish to poison himself if he didn't have to. Accepted, was all he said in return. The second is a man by the name of Uchiha Madara. Naruto started at the name, though it had been mentioned once before. The fox nodded. Yes, you've heard of him. I want him dead, boy, and painfully so. Since I cannot do this from my current lodgings, the task falls to you. It shouldn't present much of a problem, as you were already planning to kill him. When Naruto opened his mouth, a question on the tip of his tongue, the fox interrupted once more. Information about that man will be revealed to you in due time, though there is little you need to know about him other than his rule over a group of humans who called themselves Uchiha, and that his chakra was more sinister than even my own. The Kyuubi shook its head. My relationship with that man is not to be questioned. Is that clear? Naruto kept his silence as he pondered the deal. Of course the sentiment was clear. He didn't question the Kyuubi's hatred of Madara, at least not openly. It was likely a sore subject filled with residual anger that Naruto wanted no part of. A small bubble of humor threatened to well up in him as he envisioned some embarrassing history between the two. The Kyuubi had obviously come out the loser in whatever conflict they had had. The humor disappeared as soon as it had hit. That familiar bubble of fear, the one he had ruthlessly tried to crush over the years, when he thought of the man who was likely the mastermind behind Akatsuki's plot against him, rose up once more. If the man was good enough to get the better of the Kyuubi of all things. Naruto didn't want to think about the kind of power at the man's disposal. The boy's mind returned to the deal he and the fox were striking when another blast of hot air struck him in the face. The beast was impatient, it seemed. It was a good deal, almost too good. It wasn't about to stop him though, and the fox had said itself that it didn't want Naruto dead. There was no drawback to that. Still, there was one sticking point. With your power, I want to make sure that my mind isn't overshadowed like it was at first on the bridge. I need to be in control of my own body. The fox hesitated for a moment, but nodded its head in acceptance. Agreed, boy. Do we have a deal? Naruto took a deep breath, hesitating once more in the face of a choice that would likely change his life. He consoled himself with the knowledge that this power would allow him to better survive, a goal he had been working toward for years now. If he had to, he would simply refrain from using the beast's power. With any luck, he would be able to properly avoid Akatsuki for a few years to come. That would hopefully be enough time to get to an acceptable level where he could at least hold his own. He would use the fox's power then, and only then. Besides, it wasn't like he would be up against similarly powerful opponents anytime soon. A and S-ranked shinobi didn't grow on trees. Resolve hardened to determination in Naruto's mind, and a single nod happened almost of its own accord. We have a deal. The Kyuubi simply nodded. Deep within the mind of the Biju, hidden from Naruto by a force of will sharpened over a millennia, the fox smiled. So, what exactly does that mean? Naruto sighed for what seemed to be the 1000th time that day. It had been an unspoken, unanimous decision to stay and help with the cleanup effort after the battle on the bridge, despite the searing grief Team 10 was in. It was what a Soma would have wanted, had been the rationale. The previous day had been cleaning up the mess at the bridge. The majority of the city's population had turned out to help, not that Team 10 truly cared. The idea behind it, though unspoken, was to keep the minds of the genin off Asuma's death. Unfortunately, with the general population doing most of the work, it left Team 10 with nothing to do but sit, think, and talk. That, of course, led to Naruto fielding questions about his mysterious near transformation back on the bridge, as the genin certainly had no wish to think or talk about what had happened to Asuma. The man's death would be an open wound for some time to come. There had been more than a little residual fear of Naruto and his two teammates, rightfully so. It wasn't every day that your blonde friend went on a rampage. The fear had only disappeared when Naruto had sought to clear up the mess, assuring them that he was, in fact, completely in control of the power he had shown at the bridge. It wasn't a lie, but they were still understandably wary. Somewhat optimistically, he noticed that they were far more contemplative than wary. Having no wish to either deceive his friends or beat around the bush, Naruto had taken the direct route, outright stating that he housed the Kyuubi and that the beast's chakra flowing into his system had caused the minor and major changes his team had seen in him. It had been silent in the room for nearly a quarter of an hour since, only now broken by Kiba's question. Naruto didn't exactly have high hopes about his friends' reactions, but they seemed to be taking the news well, all things considered. "It means exactly what I said," Naruto said with a long-suffering note in his voice. "The Kyuubi is sealed in my chakra system, and I have some limited access to its chakra and mind. Nothing more, nothing less." Kiba was silent once more, the dog ninja scratching the ears of his partner in contemplation. Naruto didn't much care about the silence. It was certainly better than any screaming that might have originally resulted from his friends in his opinion. He would be patient. This wasn't something that could be rushed, as he knew from his own experience. He had taken the better part of a sleepless night to come to terms with what the yondaime had done to him, and he still had lingering questions, unanswerable questions, whirling about in his mind even now. "How?" Ino asked softly. "How could someone actually do something like that?" The girl mumbled ambiguously, more to herself than to anyone else. Naruto remained silent as the girl met his eyes for the first time in 20 minutes. He held her gaze for what felt like an eternity, silently trying to convey the message that he was the same Naruto from 3 days ago, that nothing had changed in him, that he was the same Naruto that Ino knew. He didn't bother trying to answer the girl's question. After a few more minutes of oppressive silence, Naruto spoke once more. "From what little I know, there's no real way to kill a Biju. They're chakra constructs given form through excessive human emotion. It's only possible to seal their chakra someplace." A sigh escaped his lips once more. "I just happen to be that someplace." "Do you know why?" Ino asked gently, far more gently than Naruto had ever heard her before. She seemed almost afraid that he would break if she spoke too loudly. "No." Naruto shook his head. "The Sandaime probably has some idea, but if he does, he won't tell me. To my knowledge, I was just born in the wrong place at the wrong time." "But how can he not tell you?" Ino burst out. Naruto nearly jumped at the intensity in the girl's voice. Kiba looked up sharply from where he had been petting Akamaru. "I mean, it's your life, right? Who has more right to know than you?" she asked incredulously. "I've been asking myself that for months." "It's his decision," was the simple answer. He had long tried to rationalize the Sandaime's silence about both his condition and how it came to be, and that was the best he had come up with. The Hokage could do what he wished. Naruto simply had to live with it. Bullshit. Ino was pacing now. It was a habit of hers whenever she got worked up. Naruto and Kiba shared a quick, unsure glance. "He has no right to keep something like that from you." Naruto weathered the girl's anger with stoicism he hadn't known he possessed. "It wasn't about what was right, Ino, it's about security. For all I know, I could have some nearly extinct bloodline that genetically predisposes me to holding the fox." Naruto's tone clearly suggested that he didn't think that was the case. "It's exactly why he didn't tell me about the fox until just recently too. Having known me when I was younger, do you think it would have been a good idea to tell me about something like that?" He let the rhetoric sit for a few moments. Of course it wouldn't have been a good idea. The same principle applies to this. And you just roll with that? Kiba raised an eyebrow. The dog boy had been surprisingly quiet about the whole thing, preferring to let Naruto explain and Ino ask questions to this point. Naruto shrugged. There's not too much I can do about it, really. I try not to think about it for the most part, preferring to just do what I can about what I can actually control. Naruto neglected to mention that this was only a recent attitude adjustment. The info was distributed on a need-to-know basis only. It's why I didn't tell you guys straight out. So why does the whole village need to know? Ino asked harshly, though it wasn't directed at Naruto, only the situation. The girl had unknowingly echoed one of Naruto's more frustrating questions from when he had first learned of the Kyuubi. I assume that this is why you get all those stares back home? Naruto nodded as he met the Yamanaka's eyes. Some people found out early on, and Saratobi let the rest know so as not to start a mass panic due to a rumor. He created a law that made letting anyone in the younger generation in on the secret, myself included, punishable by death. S-Class, Ino, and Kiba murmured at the same time. Naruto gave each of them a nod. Ino finally finished her pacing, whatever anger she had either spent or reserved for later. Kiba had shifted back to playing with Akamaru. Naruto glanced at both of his teammates in turn, inwardly shocked and nervous at the lack of reaction they were having. Aside from the conversation, both Ino and Kiba seemed to be moving on like things were the same as ever. That's it, the blonde asked with trepidation. Both his teammates looked to him in surprise. What's it? Kiba asked in confusion. This. Naruto flailed his arms about, gesticulating wildly at the room and their group. I expected a bit more of a reaction, he finished. Of all of the scenarios Naruto had envisioned, calm acceptance was at the bottom of the most likely to happen list. Kiba and Ino shared a quick glance, each a bit surprised at Naruto's outburst, but neither confused about it. They knew enough about their teammate to know that he led less than an ideal life back in Konoha, and that it was mostly due to the citizens who subtly ostracized him, even in front of their own eyes. Well, Ino started calmly. It doesn't really change anything, now does it? You're still Naruto, right? The Yamanaka shrugged. You've had this thing for longer than we've been a team, so it's not like it's some recent change. Naruto nodded hesitantly, not quite believing the words coming from his female teammate. What did you expect? Kiba asked with an all-too-familiar smirk. Give us some damn credit. We're not like them, Naruto, Ino stated. No explanation for who them was needed. Naruto sat back, his back pressing into the thin plaster walls of Tazuna's house. The boy barely kept a radiant smile from splitting his face as his teammates' acceptance washed over him. He had no idea of what to say, so he simply kept silent. You are still a dick, though, Kiba warned. Naruto snorted loudly, as did Ino, though the girl couldn't stop herself from smacking the back of Kiba's head. The group degenerated into silence once more, each absorbed in their own thoughts. It wasn't a common state of inertia for Team 10, they usually bickered in order to fill the silence, rather than think about their options. Now, however, it was almost a given that they would be absorbed in their own thoughts. 3 days ago, their sensei had been cut down, and none would deny the fact that they were more than a little lost without Asuma there to guide them. We're gonna have to move, Kiba said, uncharacteristically subdued. We have to go back home sometime. Agreed, said Naruto. Our mission objective is done. Tazuna's in no more danger now that Gatu's dead. Asuma needs to be brought back too, he finished, a small stutter at his sensei's name the only inflection in his voice. Ino and Kiba nodded along with him. Neither was particularly willing to stay longer than necessary, the mission's completeness tasting like ashes in their mouths given the loss they sustained. It was a Pyrrhic victory at best, and even then, the victory on the bridge hardly felt like anything resembling success. In the minds of Team 10, the mission to Wave Country had been an unmitigated disaster. Naruto's eyes flickered over to the lone storage scroll laying gently upon one of the pillows in the bedroom now shared by all three Team 10 members. It was impossible to believe that just 3 days ago, the team had been full, happy, if dysfunctional, and perfectly willing to believe in their own superiority. Now, they were broken, the two parts of their sensei locked away in a storage scroll for easy transport back to Konoha. It was in that instant that Naruto made up his mind. "Pack up," he ordered. "We're leaving." Ino and Kiba stared at him for one long moment, before they began gathering their belongings without question. No explanation was offered, none was needed. It had taken Team 10 5 days to get from Konoha to Wave, but that was with Tazuna slowing them down. Without him, at full pace, the Genin trio could make the journey in under 18 hours. At full pace with linked Shunshin's interspersed in the running, that time could be cut down to 12. It was not yet 11 o'clock in the morning. Naruto planned to be back in Konoha by midnight. He was getting the fuck out of this kami-forsaken country. The team was packed and ready to go within 20 minutes of Naruto's unheralded order. The last bit to be packed was the storage scroll holding Asuma. The blonde boy gently placed it in his backpack, right on top, fighting the urge to both cry and laugh at the fact that he was, quite literally, be carrying his sensei home. "What the fuck is wrong with me?" he thought as he stifled a small chuckle. Ino's light touch on his shoulder shook him from his thoughts, and he followed his two teammates out of the bedroom and down the stairs. Tazuna's family was sitting quietly in their kitchen, all three members wearing black out of respect for the man who had taken their plight upon his shoulders with no prompting, and had paid the price with his life. Tsunami rose as the three genin entered, but said nothing as they passed through without a word. Even the normally expressive Inari, who had become far more positive in the wake of Gata's death, had nothing to say. The genin trio was halfway to the tree line surrounding the humble abode when Tazuna's voice rang out from behind them. "Thank you," was shouted across the clearing, causing the three genin to turn as one to face the bridge builder. Regret was written over the man's face like it had never been before, true sorrow for what the ninja children even had been put through as a result of his actions. He made to say more, but choked on his words. "Thank you so much," was all he managed, voice cracking as he turned his gaze to the ground, unable or unwilling to meet the eyes of Team 10. The trio said nothing as they turned as one to the tree line, disappearing from the bridge builder's view as Shunshin carried them away from Wave Country in a burst of speed and chakra.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.